I'm Jim Carney.
I'm Linda Hirsch.
And this is EdCast, a program created and produced by educators for everyone interested in education.
With the new mayor certain for 2013, education stakeholders are looking ahead to the changes that may come with the new administration. But some want to be sure the new mayor understands what parents, teachers, community members, and students see as important to improving education in New York City. In order to make many voices heard, the coalition A Plus NYC has launched a citywide initiative called PS 2013, Shaping an Education Agenda for the Next Mayor. Today, we'll meet with those behind this initiative to find out about its work and find out ways that you can participate in this important conversation.
Later on in the program, we'll sit in on a community roundtable meeting recently held at NYU, where parents, educators, and other stakeholders discussed how they envisioned the future of city schools and what they would like to say to potential mayoral candidates. But now, let's join Linda and her guests in the studio.
My guests today are Zakiyah Ansari, public school parent and spokesperson for New Yorkers for Great Public Schools, Leonie Haimson, founder of Class Size Matters, and Shino Tanikawa from New York City Kids Pack. Thank you for coming to EdCast today.
Thank you
Welcome.
for having us.
You're welcome. Why is 2013 such an important year for education?
Well, we're going to get a new mayor. We're having an election coming up this year, and this mayor has not only had 3 terms, but has had an unprecedented control over what happens in our public schools. And so many of us who are parents and teachers and advocates are hoping for a real change in the next mayor, because the direction our schools have gone towards in the last 12 years have not been good ones.
Now, I know a coalition called the A Plus NYC coalition is very engaged in taking part in this. Tell us a little bit about this coalition, what it is, why it was formed.
Right. So A Plus NYC is a group of advocacy groups, parents, student groups, policymakers who realize that what's been missing over the last 12 years is any kind of resemblance of research-based strategies to help our struggling schools. And it was about bringing together those great minds and those stakeholders who have probably over the last 12 years, just like many of the parents, have stood with us on steps of City Hall, advocating for some of these research pieces to be implemented in education. And so we came together just for that reason, because we wanted to create a hub, a place where parents and community members, mayoral candidates, and others who are running for office could go to and actually look at the best practices and the research that's worked, not only in New York City, but across the country to improve schools.
Now, we mentioned some other names, Class Size Matters, New York City Kids Pack, New Yorkers for Great Public Schools. How do you all come together on this?
Well, I think we're working together and apart also. I think that there is a tremendous consensus among parents and advocates about what needs to happen. But at the same time, we all have different sorts of roles. So my organization focuses primarily on class size, but also on issues like testing. Zakiyah's organization is focused on putting together the best research, which I helped contribute to with some research briefs. And we also have New York City Kids Pack, which is somewhat more political, and you might want to...
It's a political action committee. And we are reaching out to parents and actually anybody who is interested in public education in New York City to join us so that we can ensure we elect the right person as the mayor. And we'll probably go even beyond mayoral race if we are successful. But it is a political action committee. We will be conducting candidate survey, and we'll be hosting candidates forums.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how you're going to be getting a lot of input from people to tell the next mayor what people want to hear. There's an initiative now called PS 2013, Shaping an Education Agenda for the Next Mayor. It's caught our attention, certainly. Tell us a little bit about that and how that's going to be done and what you expect to get from that.
So just to be clear, like New Yorkers for Great Public Schools is a separate piece from A Plus NYC,
Right.
But A Plus NYC, by the end of January, we expect to have put together about 75 community meetings. So since October to the end of January, we've had community meetings with youth, with parents and community members, with elected officials and others to really, for the first time in 12 years, and it's been an exciting conversation because it's been the first time when you sit down and talk to people that they say, you really want to know what we think about what's happening in our public schools. And it's been a great experience, but it's also been an experience that has been, has created a lot of excitement around the possibilities of what can be. And I think just preliminary, some of the results that came out of it, without giving away everything, was that clearly 87% of those who responded to our surveys have said that they're very dissatisfied with the standardized testing, right? As well as one of their priorities, they believe, is that there should be a more focus on music, art, and language in schools. So that's just a little bit of some of the information that's coming out of the meetings, the community meetings that we've been having.
And what are you going to do when you get all this information, when you have all these community meetings? What are you going to do with all that information?
So the information gets compiled into a database where the information gets coded. So like class size might come up quite a bit. That gets coded into one number. And then what happens is in March, or around March or April, we hope to bring together this educational agenda once again to those folks who participated, bring them together for a citywide meeting, put everything together, and then have mayoral candidates hopefully come, or elected officials or others. And at the same time, prior to that, potentially have this kind of bus trip that's around the city, which we don't want to give too much away, but it'll be an exciting opportunity for more folks around the city to participate and have some kind of impact on the agenda.
So in these sessions that actually Jim and I really had the pleasure of attending when it was really interesting, you asked people some specific questions. Want to go over some of the input that you want from people? What are some of the things that you were asking them at these meetings?
Well, they asked us what we remembered best about our own school experiences, what we liked best, which I thought was a great question, because it made me really think about what was it that really stood out in my memory, and I don't have a great memory. But a lot of people in our group anyway, in our focus group, responded that different projects that they had been involved in was what really stood out in their mind.
Kind of experiential learning
Yeah,
idea.
like for me, I remember building a model of an ancient Egyptian house in 4th grade. And I think that, much of the research also says that hands-on project-based learning is a very effective way to impart knowledge.
What would you say was something that you remember?
I would say creativity in the curriculum and not a test-driven curriculum. It's something that I cherished growing up, and I cherish in my own children's education. I don't want the education of my children and all our children to just become math and literacy measured by test scores.
Standardized testing.
So in the meetings, the questions are, what is your vision for education for students? Like, what should every child know, learn, and do before they graduate to be prepared for college and or careers, right? What does that look like in the classroom? So we take it directly to the classroom. What would that look like? Children are laughing. Maybe there's smaller class sizes, right? There's interaction between teachers.
Laughing?
Yes,
Children are having a good
imagine
time in
how-
school?
oh my,
wow, that
right?
is a very
Then
radical
right. And then what
Children
happens?
having fun.
What does that look like in the school, right? How does that look in the school? You take
A
it
cheerful,
broader.
happy place.
Yeah. Are their parents interacting in the school? Do you? Is that something that's community-based organizations in there? Are principals and teachers talking? Are students engaged in part of the process of conversation? And I think the last piece is like, the next mayor is there in front of you. What do you want? Kind of what you're asking here. What is your priority?
Right.
What do you want them to know? And I think it just encompasses a lot of the work that we've been doing over the years of
Now
trying to get
you're
that information
inviting
out.
anyone who's interested to come to these
Absolutely.
sessions. And some of the questions you ask are very sort of pedagogically based. What is your vision for what happens in a classroom? How do you think this would happen? Are you finding that people from across a broad range of experiences are able to participate in this conversation? And what are you finding? Are they able to articulate what they want to see happening?
Very much so. I
Very
mean, we've
much
had
so.
young people. We have kids that are in
Okay.
high school. Yes, we've done a couple of groups with young people in high school from Staten Island. There was a youth court in Staten Island. We also did youth court here in Manhattan. These young people are very smart. They get it. They understand it. And as much as we try to, or those out there try to say that they don't, they understand 100%. And many of them had said things like, you know what, I want my teacher to be able to teach me and not, have to rush on to do the next lesson because they're on the schedule of things. And so we don't want it to be skipped by. We want to really understand and digest the information that's given to us. We want to be, we do want to ensure that you know, we have time to have conversations and talk, less safety agents in schools, right? So it's not even necessarily all about the pedagogy. It's
Right.
like, we want to feel safe in our
it's the
schools, you know?
environment.
In Staten Island, it was a lot about, you know, we have a lot of suicide in Staten Island. We need more social workers and guidance counselors and things like that. So it really runs the gamut.
I noticed there was also a survey instrument that asked people to identify their current priorities for the New York City school system. And you asked people to rank, I know you've alluded to some of this already, how important to the following. And it was best teaching and learning practices, art, music, gym, foreign language, better parent-community engagement, resources, class size. What are some of the things that you're beginning to see that people are identifying as the priorities in the school system? You already mentioned a turning away from standardized testing. What else has been coming up for parents and people who are participating?
I mean, I'm sure these ladies
Shino?
can
Well,
talk
I mean,
about
I don't know
It's
their
not
survey.
different.
We have our own
Right.
survey, which
And
hasn't
tell us
gone
what you're
online yet.
finding
But
on,
I know the Department of Education has their own parent survey for the last 4 years, and every single year, the top priority of parents is smaller classes, and yet every single year,
Get bigger.
class size goes up.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of reasons why we do not think that this administration is responsive to the priorities of parents and the needs of kids, but class size is definitely one of those areas. And you know, I think also both Shino and Zakiyah mentioned the overemphasis on standardized tests is something that parents feel very strongly about, has not moved our schools in the right direction, and is only getting worse every year.
Right.
And the answer from the Department of Education is, oh, we're just going to make better tests, and they're going to be longer tests, and they're going to be more expensive tests,
And there'll be
and
more of
somehow,
them.
you know, somehow that's going to really engage students and develop their critical thinking. Whereas if you really look at what develops the critical thinking, it's not standardized testing, it's the kind of classroom atmosphere, which, you know, I believe small classes is very critical to get the sort of back and forth, the intellectual engagement, the argument, the discussion, the debate, that it's very difficult to have when you have
Certainly people who
34
have,
kids in a class.
People with wherewithal certainly prefer to put their own children in small class sizes.
Right,
That's what I've seen.
And also a rich and robust curriculum is really, really important. You know, we all know children learn in 1,000, a million different ways. Individual children have individual ways of learning whatever it is that they're learning in their best way. When you have a rich and robust curriculum that really has enough attention on the arts and physical education and math and science and literacy, when you have that diverse array of subject areas, every child can learn well. When you narrow it down to just English and math, which is what's happening as a result of the testing craziness, some children are not learning as well because that's just not how they learn.
Right.
They need to have movement and the dance and the music and the arts to be able to learn
Right.
math and science and reading. So that kind of cross-disciplinary and comprehensive approach to teaching is disappearing, and that's really disconcerting.
Jim and I, as I said, had the opportunity to go to one of the forums held at New York University. So let's take a look and see what some of the participants there had to say.
I'm Leonie Haimson. I run an organization called Class Size Matters, and we are all very excited and full of anticipation because we are going to finally have a new mayor, hopefully in about a year. And I don't know about you, but I've been pretty impatient with the mayor that we've had for the last 12 years. So clearly with mayoral control, this mayor controls education policy like no other mayor in recent history. And many of the things, some of them you may agree with, some of you may not agree with, but he's had pretty much complete control over what's happened in our schools. So we think it's really important that the next mayor, whoever he or she may be, gets a real sense of what parents think has gone right, perhaps, what's gone wrong, and how the next mayor should be different, if any. So the A Plus Coalition is a coalition that I belong to, our organization belongs to, as well as many other organizations in the city. And they are doing, along with different organizations and community groups, a series of roundtable discussions about what parents and others would really like to see in terms of their children's schools. And hopefully this will be not only an interesting exercise for us, but will feed into a report that they plan to do eventually, and they plan to then give it to all the mayoral candidates.
The session then broke into groups where participants discussed what they thought was needed to improve city schools.
Like what your vision for an ideal education? What do you want a student to know, learn, and do before they graduate from high school? Basically, what I've seen here is that there's one area about just in terms of the concept of enjoying reading, but like the world-rounded education around math, ELA, persuasive essays and writing. Then we've got basic math defined, and the basic civics of government and how elections work.
After the sessions, I had the opportunity to speak with some of the participants about what they would like to tell the mayoral candidates. If you had one thing that you could tell the mayoral candidate about the city schools, how to improve them, what would you tell them?
There are many things, but the thing that comes to my mind more than anything else is that if you really want to have a sincere, more parental involvement, you have got to allow parents to have some say and have a seat at the table and have some governance over the decisions and the policies that are being made about our children. This business model that's being used, where we're being called stakeholders, and you got this PEP, has really made parents feel like they're totally left out of the system. And then, you say you want more parental involvement, and it's almost insulting. There are many things, decisions and policies that are being made about my child that I absolutely I can't even offer an opinion on, and it's very disheartening.
That the high stakes testing, the problems, the use of the testing is really causing the education system to not benefit the students. And I think that the use of testing to evaluate teachers, the use of testing to hold children back in grades, the use of tests to grade schools is really causing the curriculum to be changed and the collaboration in the schools not to take place. And I really think that we really need to refocus the education on what good education is.
Well, he has to pick a Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha-like figure to be the chancellor. You have to pick the right person to be in charge, and generally leave them alone.
Now, back to Linda and her guests in the studio.
Doesn't seem to be too much confidence in the current mayor's approach to education. So as we talk about influencing the next mayor and the next mayoral election, so what are some of the specific issues that your groups are going to be focusing on that you really want to make sure that you have a voice in? What are some of the key things?
Well, New York City Kids Political Action Committee is developing a survey for candidates, and the founding members of our organization have really come together for certain key points or guiding principles, so to speak. Some of them are governance system. Mm-hmm. Do we really want to have one person in charge of the whole system with 1.1 million students and 80,000 teachers? So that is something we are going to be asking the candidates pointed questions about.
Do you think any of them will say they don't think there should be mayoral control of education?
I think they're all going to say they want mayoral control because
so
they're going to
too.
say they can do a better job, but I'm not convinced. The other areas...
And there are ways of moderating that. Some of them have already said that they would be willing to consider certain kinds of checks and balances to give community education councils more authority, or to change the makeup of the panel for educational policy. What I think is, none of them have been very specific about any of their policies. But I think it's our job as parents to push them really hard to be specific and to make it known what it is that parents really want to see. And without the kind of effort that we're all putting into it, my fear is that they will get away with being as vague as possible, which is really one of the jobs of politicians, and just say, as they all say, well, we're going to listen to parents more. which
What does
is
that
not
mean? And
enough.
How are we going to?
How
What are
would
we
you
going to do with
listen?
what we hear?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I noticed that New York City Kids Pack also has made a point about opposing the privatization of education, and that's something that I think we should discuss a little bit.
Absolutely.
What does that mean to you, and what are you seeing that's scary in terms of what's happening in the privatization of education?
Well, I don't want to keep dwelling on the testing, but that's one example of the privatization of our education system, this craziness over testing. And it's the publishing companies that are making billions of dollars off these tests. That's one part of privatizing our education. And also, I don't want to I don't want to oppose the charter school movement outright, but that is another form of privatization. When you have a nonprofit organization taking over our public school systems, and there is a place for charter schools in this world, I believe in that. But when it becomes you're handing over a school to a nonprofit organization, and there's
space.
and there seems to be no accountability once that handover is done, that's another form of privatization. And we see that happening more and more. And I think public education really belongs in the realm of public governance.
We've talked about a school governance structure that has in it checks and balances. What would that look like?
Well,
What do we mean by that? in terms
I
of
mean,
this?
what's astonishing to me about mayoral control is it's really the only city agency, the Department of Education, where, for example, the city council cannot make law. So our police department, our fire department, our Department of Health, all those things the city council has a say in setting policies. And of course the mayor is the one that mostly makes policies, but the city council can overturn or ratify those policies. In the area of education, because of its peculiar structure, the city council has no authority to make law. So one of the things that we're going to be asking candidates about, and some of them have already said that they would consider, is allowing the city council to provide that checks and balances on some very basic issues, which I think is very critical, because one-man rule is not good on any level in our government, and we've seen a lot of abuses over the last 12 years. Another area which I think really needs checks and balances is giving more voice to parents, and not just saying, oh, we're going to listen to parents more. We have to have something institutionalized in the system where parents have a voice in the direction of their individual schools and in their communities, because otherwise we have seen this centralized system where they are imposing policies which make no sense for those specific schools and communities.
I was just going to say, New Yorkers for Great Public Schools has not been shy about critiquing the mayor. Neither have any of these ladies either, right? And their organizations. And we're not going to stop. And I think the fact that we had a mayor who put in Kathy Black and thought that was okay, there's a problem. The fact that we have a mayor that's closed 140 schools and still only 13% of Black and Latino children are graduating college and career ready and claims that's success, that's a problem, right? The fact that we have a mayor that could go to DC and say, you know what, I would fire half the teaching staff if I could, that's a problem. And so I think those are just three examples, but they're examples of why it is so important to shape a new direction for public education, and as three concrete examples of why we need the next mayor to be very upfront. And I believe that parents and community members and everyone in this city is ready to hold those people accountable like never before. I really believe that. I think that people are going to come to you, whether it's with the surveys here or our surveys or other surveys, and they're going to hold these mayoral candidates accountable for giving real answers to these real issues that we have real examples to, and we expect them. And I think part of A Plus NYC is also to motivate and organize the grassroots, the ground, the people, the parents, the students, to whomever becomes mayor, hold them accountable even after, because this can't be a short term. It can't just be about getting them in office. It has to be, how do we continue this push to make them, for all the things that they promised and said they were going to do, hold them accountable day one.
Do you see anything positive that's been done in terms of education over the last 12 years that a new mayor could possibly build on, or do you think it's all just, it was all just a horrible waste of 12 years? Was there anything positive?
Well, one of the things that the teachers union talks about, which I think is positive, is that teachers did get a raise. They got a 40% raise, but I've also heard from other teachers that their day was extended. So, you know, and there are a few other things. I happen to like the parent coordinator position, though there are a lot of parents out there who say it has not proved helpful in their schools. But I think the vast majority of policies have been negative ones. And Zakiyah brings up a point about closing schools rather than improving them. This has been devastating to communities. It's been devastating to parents and teachers. You have thousands of people to show up at these meetings and say, do not close our schools, and they go and do it. And yet they claim to be responding in other ways to parental choice. What does that mean when parents are coming out in thousands saying, do not close our schools? That is not responding to parental choice. When the number one priority of parents is reduce class size, and class size goes up
make
every
a school
year.
better. We only have 1 minute left, so I just want to ask you, how can our viewers get involved in some of these forums and make their own voices heard?
Go ahead.
Well, we can, the Kids Pack has a way to sign up and become a member, or if you just want to sign up and hear about news from us, whether it's help us create our surveys or come to our candidate forums. And you can also come to ClassSizeMatters.org with the latest news about class size. We also have a New York City Parents blog, which you can read about news. And Zakiyah?
I mean, they can visit the aplusnyc.org website and actually participate in the PS
Yes,
2013.
if they want to come to PS 2013
They
forums.
can go on there, invite us to come. If you give us 25 folks, we'll come and we'll facilitate the whole process. But they can also participate and answer the questions on the website. So if they can't make it and they want to do it and share, you can like our page, our Facebook pages, as well as NYGPS, and follow us on Twitter. There's a whole host of ways, and we hope that people will engage in all of our organizations because they all are doing fabulous things. And it's really focused around the kids of New York City. It's about time. My time is too.
Thank you all for coming on the program and for sharing all this information with us. I think you are really opening up the channels for people to communicate what they would like our next mayor to pay attention to. So thank you all so very much for joining us today on EdCast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And please don't go away. We will be right back with our Ed Bites. Welcome back to this edition of Ed Bites.
What lies ahead for education in 2013? Looking back may provide some clues. We begin with some items culled from the Heckinger Report, a nonprofit news organization focused on education journalism at Columbia University's Teacher College. Here are some of their top stories in education for 2012.
Education was consumed with teacher evaluation in 2012, as school systems nationwide sought to develop new approaches to this thorny issue. Linking teacher effectiveness to student scores on standardized tests is one of the more contentious recommended policies, and states are examining a host of other procedures.
Enrollment figures indicate a drop in college enrollment, including private colleges and even previously fast-growing community colleges. Is this a blip or a trend?
Teacher professional development was a key concern in 2012. Millions have been spent in efforts to improve teacher quality. Yet very little is known about the effectiveness of the many programs run by companies and universities in order to help teachers perfect their craft.
Other stories sure to make headlines in 2013 include the recently released recommendations from the Governor's Education Reform Commission and the new Common Core curriculum. And
in New York City, the Bloomberg push for more charter schools pleases some and enrages others, while the national emphasis on high-stakes testing is drawing critics from across the country and a pushing back from parent groups.
That's it for this edition of EdCast. 2013 promises to be another dramatic year in education. We hope you'll stay with us for an in-depth look at what works and what doesn't work, and the latest in education research and policy.
Till next time, class dismissed.